The distress beacon wasn't supposed to be active. Commander Elias Rourke frowned at the blinking red signal on his console, a deep unease settling in his gut. The Erebus, a Generation-class colony ship, was locked in automated transit. It had departed Earth over a century ago, bound for a distant exoplanet. 10,000 colonists in cryosleep, its systems running on fail-safe protocols, untouched until arrival. So why was it broadcasting a distress call now? Rourke's team aboard the Vanguard had been tasked with a routine systems check, ensuring the vessel's autopilot remained functional as it neared its destination. They weren't prepared for an emergency. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Voss, glanced at him. Could be a system glitch. Rourke shook his head. Glitches don't activate emergency protocols. Something's wrong. Dr. Owen Carter, their mission's AI specialist, leaned over the console, his fingers flying across the interface. His expression darkened. This isn't a glitch. The beacon activated 3 days ago. But there's no sign of system failure. It's like, he hesitated. Like what? Rourke pressed. Like someone turned it on manually. Silence. That was impossible. The colonists were in cryosleep, and no one else was supposed to be aboard. Rourke exhaled sharply. Suit up. We're boarding. The Vanguard docked with the massive Erebus, their small crew of 6 preparing for entry. The colony ship was a silent monolith against the void, its exterior scarred from centuries of space travel. As the airlock hissed open, the staleness of recycled air greeted them. Darkness stretched beyond the entry corridor. The ship's automated lights flickered sluggishly, as if struggling to remember their function. All right, Rourke said. Stay sharp. We find the problem, fix it, and get out. They moved forward, rifles slung but ready. The corridors were eerily silent, save for the distant hum of the ship's life support systems. Carter accessed a nearby console. Bringing up logs. The screen flickered. Lines of corrupted data scrolled, then stabilized. His brow furrowed. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. What? Voss asked. The logs, they reset 2 weeks ago. Before that, everything's blank. A chill ran down Rourke's spine. Reset by who? Carter didn't answer. He was already moving toward the Central Command terminal. The bridge was just ahead. The doors slid open, revealing a ghost ship. Consoles powered down. Chairs sat vacant. But something was wrong. The seats weren't empty. Straps were undone, but restraints dangled as if they'd been used recently. Someone was here, Voss said, voice barely above a whisper. Carter worked fast, accessing the ship's database. A moment later, his face drained of color. Rourke, his voice was tight. Cryologs show, the pods were opened. Rourke tensed. How many? Carter turned, eyes wide. All of them. A heavy silence filled the bridge. That's not possible, Voss said. The ship's AI would have kept them under. Unless something overrode the system, Carter said. He gestured to the dark consoles. The mainframe's been wiped. We have no idea what happened after the pods opened. Rourke's gut churned. 10,000 people, awake but unaccounted for. Then Voss stiffened. Do you hear that? A distant noise. Faint. Rhythmic. Footstep. Rourke's grip tightened on his rifle. Move. They followed the sound, their boots light against the metal flooring. The corridor curved toward the medical bay. As they approached, the automatic doors malfunctioned, stuttering before grinding open. What they saw made Rourke's breath catch. Blood. Smears of crimson streaked the floor, handprints trailing toward the darkened far end. Surgical beds lay overturned. Cabinets were shattered, their contents strewn about. And in the center of the room, a body. No, not a body. It was wrong. The form was humanoid, but distorted. Skin stretched unnaturally over elongated limbs. The face, if it could be called that, was an amalgamation of features, as if multiple people had been forced into one grotesque shape. The mouth gaped open in a frozen scream, its teeth jagged and irregular. Carter staggered back. What the hell? Then the body twitched. The movement was slight but undeniable. A ragged breath wheezed from the deformed throat. It was alive. Jesus Christ, Voss whispered. Rourke forced himself forward, weapon trained. Carter, what the hell happened to them? Carter was already scanning with his portable analyzer. His expression darkened. This isn't just a mutation, he murmured. The genetic structure, it's shifting. As if it doesn't know what form it's supposed to be in. Rourke's stomach tightened. Is it contagious? Unknown, Carter admitted. The thing on the floor moved again. Then its head snapped toward them. It let out a wet, gurgling cry, an unnatural sound that echoed through the bay. Then, footstep. Not distant this time. Close. Too close. Voss spun, raising her rifle. Movement. Shapes emerged from the corridor. People. Or what used to be people. They shuffled forward with jerking, unnatural motions, their bodies writhing, skin fluctuating like liquid trying to solidify into a coherent shape. Their faces twisted, flickering between expressions of agony, confusion, and something worse, recognition. Rourke took a step back. Carter. His voice was sharp. What are we dealing with? The scientist's face was pale. He swallowed. They're not stable. The things stepped forward. The air seemed to distort around them, like the fabric of reality was struggling to hold them together. One reached out, fingers elongating, reforming mid-motion. Then it lunged. Voss fired. The energy blast tore through its torso, only for the flesh to ripple, reforming instantly. No wound. No blood. The thing grinned. Rourke didn't hesitate. Fall back. They sprinted down the corridor, the shambling figures moving unervingly fast in pursuit. The ship groaned around them, lights flickering. We can't fight them, Carter panted. They're not. A scream cut through the hallway. One of the things had caught up. It grabbed Martinez, one of their engineers. The moment its hands made contact, Martinez convulsed. His form flickered, skin rippling like water. And then he changed. His body twisted, features shifting, distorting, as if something unseen was rewriting his very existence. His eyes locked onto Rourke. And in that moment, the horror became something else. Recognition. As if Martinez knew him. As if he was him. Then his face dissolved. And what was left wasn't Martinez anymore. The thing smiled. Rourke turned and ran. They barely made it to the central corridor, sealing the bulkhead behind them. The creatures pounded against the door, their distorted voices echoing. Carter leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Commander, this isn't a disease. This is something else. What? Voss demanded. Carter swallowed. The ship's AI, before it was wiped, it recorded one last entry. Rourke's jaw tightened. Play it. Carter hesitated, then pressed a button. A distorted voice crackled through the ship's speakers. Project Echo was never meant to wake them. The ship was never meant to reach its destination. The colonists, static. Then, they were never just people. Silence. Then, the bulkhead door creaked, dented inward. They were breaking through. And Rourke realized, they were never supposed to find this ship. And now they might never leave it. The bulkhead groaned as the things pounded against it. The metal warped inward, each impact bringing them closer to breaching. Move! Rourke barked. They sprinted down the corridor, boots slamming against the floor. The Erebus felt wrong. The air, the lights, the very walls seemed to pulse as if the ship itself was alive, reacting to their presence. Voss pulled up a schematic on her wrist display. Nearest secured section is Cryo Bay 1. If we can make it, go! Rourke commanded. The pounding behind them intensified. A wet sound slithered through the ship. The creatures weren't just hitting the door. They were changing again. Then, a shriek tore through the air, a sound of breaking reality. The bulkhead ruptured, and the things poured through. They didn't run. They folded through the space, their shifting forms undulating like living shadows, arms elongating unnaturally, their eyes, if they even had eyes, blazing with flickering recognition. One of them was Martinez. Or had been. His voice was a distortion of itself. You can't run, Commander. You never could? A hand shot out, stretching impossibly, reaching for Rourke. He dodged, barely, but felt the cold of it pass too close. A wrongness that scraped at his mind. Fire! He shouted. Voss and Carter unleashed hell. Plasma rounds lit up the corridor, blasting into the creatures. The projectiles passed through their bodies, making them ripple and distort, like shooting at reflections on water. And then, just as fast, they reformed. We need to move, Carter yelled. They ran. Rourke led them down a stairwell, deeper into the Erebus, past flickering emergency lights. The ship's lower decks loomed ahead, dark, silent, untouched. They reached Cryo Bay 1. The doors were sealed. Voss slapped the control panel. Come on, come on. A click. The doors groaned open. They tumbled inside, slamming the panel behind them. Silence. Panting. The room was massive, row upon row of cryopods stretching into the dim blue glow of emergency lighting. But something was off. Wait, Carter's voice was barely a whisper. They're still occupied. Rourke frowned. What? Carter moved to the nearest pod, wiping frost from the glass. Inside. A man. Peaceful. Unmoving. Still in cryosleep. Voss did the same, checking another. More colonists. Still asleep. But that didn't make sense. You said all the pods were opened, Rourke said, eyes locking onto Carter. I thought they were, Carter whispered. The logs showed. He trailed off, staring at the sleeping colonists. This doesn't add up. A sharp chime cut through the room. Then, a voice. You've finally made it? The room's speakers crackled. The voice was calm. Unnatural. Not human. Voss turned, raising her rifle. Who the hell is that? Carter paled. I think it's the AI. Rourke's gut tightened. Erebus AI was wiped. Another chime. No. I was reconfigured. Something shifted. The lights flickered, and for a fraction of a second, the cryopods blinked out of existence, then reappeared. Voss stepped back. What the hell was that? The voice continued. You do not understand what you are looking at. Rourke gritted his teeth. Then explain. Silence. Then. The colonists are still asleep. Because they were never awake? Carter inhaled sharply. That's impossible. The ship's logs. Corrupted. Rourke's skin crawled. Then what are we fighting out there? The AI's next words sent ice through his veins. You? Silence. A deep, suffocating silence. Then, the cryopods flickered again. For a split second, the people inside changed. Their features warped, becoming indistinct, as if reality was unsure of what they were supposed to be. Then they returned to normal. Voss swore under her breath. This ship is screwing with us? Carter shook his head. No. It's worse than that. He turned to Rourke, voice hushed but frantic. Commander, I think this ship is rewriting reality. The AI spoke again. You were not meant to be here. A pause. Then, something knocked from the inside of the cryopod nearest to them. A slow, rhythmic tap. Voss turned to Carter. Tell me you heard that. Carter swallowed. The tapping became a pounding. Then, the glass cracked. Something was waking up. And it wasn't human. Rourke didn't hesitate. Run. They sprinted as the pod shattered behind them. A limb, too long, too fluid, slithered out, followed by a shape that never settled on what it was supposed to be. More pods cracked open. The air filled with a low, glitching hum, like the ship itself was malfunctioning. As they reached the exit, the AI spoke one last time. This is not your story. The doors slammed shut behind them. The entire ship lurched. Lights warped around them, the walls seeming to breathe. Reality was breaking apart. And somewhere, in the endless corridors of the Erebus, something laughed. The deck lurched violently beneath their feet. Rourke slammed into a wall, catching himself before he fell. Alarms blared through the Erebus, a deafening cacophony of distortion and static, as if the ship itself was trying to scream. Keep moving, he bellowed over the noise. Voss and Carter were ahead, sprinting toward the next corridor, their flashlights barely cutting through the flickering darkness. Behind them, the things from the cryopods were waking up, one by one. A guttural, glitching howl erupted from the bay behind them. Then they came. Not running. Shifting. Their forms flickered, skipping frames, appearing and disappearing in bursts of motion that defied physics. 1 second they were slumped in their pods. The next, right behind them. They're teleporting, Voss shouted, firing wildly over her shoulder. The rounds hit and passed through. The creatures rippled like distortions in glass, flickering between forms, faces, identities. Some looked almost human. Others were unfinished, their features scrambling like corrupted data. One of them was Martinez. Or something that thought it was him. Rourke, it called in Martinez's voice. You left me behind? Rourke clenched his jaw, heart hammering. That wasn't Martinez. It couldn't be. But the hesitation nearly killed him. A shape lunged from the side, too fast. Too fluid. Voss tackled him out of the way, and the thing's arm stretched unnaturally, missing him by inches. Move, she yelled. They tore down the corridor. The ship itself felt wrong, the walls rippling like liquid, the doors flickering between open and closed. Then, a new alarm. A voice. Warning. Main reactor destabilized. Rourke skidded to a stop. Shit. Carter checked his wrist display. His face paled. Cores overloading. If we don't stabilize it, we don't have time for this. Voss snapped, firing another burst behind them. The creatures kept coming. No fear. No hesitation. Like they knew something the crew didn't. Then Carter cursed. They're hurting us? Rourke stiffened. He was right. The things weren't attacking head-on. They were pushing them, guiding them through the ship's corridors toward. A door hissed open ahead. The bridge. Go! Rourke ordered. They stumbled inside, sealing the door behind them. The bridge was in ruins. The once pristine control panels flickered with incomprehensible data, screens distorting like old transmissions. But the worst part? The captain's chair was occupied. A figure sat slumped forward, motionless, dressed in the same uniform as Rourke. His breath caught. No. Voss edged forward, rifle raised. She reached out. The figure snapped upright. And turned. Rourke stared into his own face. It was him. But wrong. His duplicate skin was too smooth, his eyes too empty, his mouth stretching into an unnatural, too wide grin. Then it spoke. You were never meant to wake up? Rourke froze. His own voice, but layered, distorted, as if spoken by 1,000 versions of himself at once. The lights flickered violently. The duplicate stood, and reality shifted. For a split second, the bridge wasn't a bridge anymore. It was a cryo-bay. Rourke was lying in a pod. His breath caught in his throat. No. No, this isn't real. The world snapped back. The bridge was the bridge again. But something had changed. Voss and Carter were staring at him. Like they weren't sure if he was real. Rourke's hands shook. We're awake. We made it back. The duplicate tilted its head. And smiled. Did you? The walls shuddered. The ship groaned, its frame bending inward like it was about to collapse. Carter clutched his head. Something's wrong. This isn't. The duplicate stepped forward. And the entire bridge shattered. Not exploded. Not collapsed. It broke apart like glass, shards of light and data spiraling into a howling void. Rourke was falling. Not through space. Not through air. Through memories. Flashes of the Erebus. The launch. The crew. The mission. And then, darkness. A voice whispered in his mind. You were never on this mission. Then, silence. Rourke gasped as he hit the ground. Not metal. Not the deck of the Erebus. Something soft. Grass. His vision swam. A warm breeze brushed against his skin. The scent of earth and rain filled his lungs. He pushed himself up, heart pounding, and his breath caught. He was standing on a planet. Not the dead, frozen world Erebus had been heading toward. A colony. It looked like home. White towers stretched toward a golden sky, their windows reflecting a familiar blue sun. People walked the streets, scientists, engineers, families, and they were staring at him. A little girl pointed. "He's awake." The crowd murmured, their faces flickering with recognition. Then a voice spoke from behind him. "Welcome back, Commander Rourke." He turned, and saw himself, the duplicate, standing there, smiling. Rourke's mind raced. No, this isn't real. His hands clenched into fists. Where am I? The duplicate's head tilted, the same inhuman precision as before. The Erebus never left. Rourke's blood ran cold. Liar. The people around him flickered, glitched. Their faces shifted, warped, became colonists in cryopods. Rourke staggered back. This is another trick. The duplicate nodded. It's all a trick. The sky rippled, and peeled away, like a layer of film burning off a reel. The city collapsed into nothing, revealing the true horror beneath. The ship. The Erebus. It was never a ship, not in the way they understood. Its walls stretched infinitely into a void of pulsing, organic metal, shifting in ways that made no sense. And in the center of it all, the core. A massive, throbbing, living thing. It was never a reactor, never an engine. It was a mind that had been dreaming for centuries, dreaming of colonists, of ships, of journeys, of them. And they were inside it. Rourke couldn't breathe. His body trembled as realization sank in. "We were never on a mission," he whispered. The duplicate smiled. "You were the mission?" Something moved in the core. A pulse. A shift. And suddenly, Rourke remembered. The launch. The departure from Earth. The excitement. The promise of a new world. Then, the detour. They had found something. Something ancient. A construct drifting through space. And they had docked. They had stepped aboard. And it had consumed them. Rourke staggered. "No. That's impossible." The duplicate's form rippled, its smile widening. "Is it?" The memories weren't real. The Erebus wasn't real. The mission had never existed. Everything they had experienced, everything, had been fabricated inside this thing's mind. A simulation. A trap. And the worst part? It was still feeding. Voss. Carter. The others, if they were still alive, they were trapped somewhere inside this nightmare. Unless he ended it. Rourke gritted his teeth, shaking off the horror. He had one shot. He turned and ran. Straight toward the core. The void shifted, the walls of the nightmare reacting. The duplicate screamed behind him, its voice distorting into something inhuman. Rourke didn't stop. Didn't hesitate. He reached his belt, the last detonator. The same one from the bridge. The same one from 1,000 waking nightmares. If this was a dream, then he'd burn it down. He tore the pin free. And through it, time slowed. The detonator spun through the air and hit the core. Light erupted. A shock wave ripped through reality. Rourke screamed. The world shattered. He woke gasping. Cold metal beneath him. The scent of antiseptic. A medical bay. A real one. Not the Erebus. Not a dream. He turned his head. Voss. Carter. Others. Alive. Strapped to medical beds, waking up one by one. A scientist stood over them, eyes wide in shock. "My God, you made it!" Rourke's chest heaved. His hands shook. Where are we?" The scientist hesitated. "You were found drifting in space. Your ship, Erebus, was empty. No power. No crew. Just 10,000 people in cryo." Rourke's blood turned to ice. "What about the core?" he rasped. The scientist frowned. There was no core. Rourke's breath hitched. No, that wasn't possible. He had destroyed it. Hadn't he? Then he saw it. The reflection in the glass. The flicker in his own eyes. A smile. Not his own. Something had made it through. And it wasn't letting go.